Have you ever felt like somewhere along the line you took a wrong turn in business? Or maybe it was the right turn to take at one point, but now it stopped taking you to where you wanted to go? Okay, I've experienced both of these scenarios, and I've learned that there are signs it might be time to make a pivot. If the thought of pivoting is overwhelming, stay with me. Pivots don't always have to be massive. Sometimes they're just small strategic adjustments that can make a big difference. You might be wondering, what does a small pivot even look like? So here's a few examples. Niching down from helping all business owners to serving only service-based business owners. Going from being a general photographer to a branding photographer. Choosing to change your business model to only working with female clients. Or it could be turning your custom graphic design business into a membership subscription. I have made 7 pivots since I started my business as a photographer in 2006. Here's the gist of what it looked like. In 2010, I became a content creator, sharing helpful content for my business and also creating content for other businesses to be featured on my channels. In 2012, I became a consultant, helping businesses create marketing and branding strategies for their team to deploy against. In 2015, I pivoted to becoming a course creator. In 2017, I created a marketing membership called Social Curator. In 2020, I became the CEO of a SaaS company where we changed from a membership into a subscription with our own tech stack. Woo! Okay, I'm so grateful for each of these pivots. Every single step got me to where I am today. Every step I was unqualified. I was stressed and I was worried and I was overwhelmed, but I refused to give up. And I have made so many mistakes. I went to the School of Hard Knocks, I graduated from the University of Google Searches, and I got a PhD from the College of YouTube. I'm here to tell you that pivots are not for the faint of heart. Pivots make you feel uncertain and insecure, and I'm here to tell you that it is because of a pivot that your business can grow in bigger ways. So if you're at a point and you feel like you're not sure of the next best step, or you know deep down in your soul that something needs to change, then let's have a conversation around pivoting. When I share about the pivots I just described, I am often asked, Jasmine, how did you know it was time to make a big move like this? I'm about to give you 10 questions to start asking yourself when considering making a pivot, and then we're gonna go over a 5-step process to actually make the move. 10 questions, 5 steps, let's go. These 10 questions won't exactly tell you if you should or you shouldn't pivot. It's not like a quiz with results, but these questions are designed to make you start thinking what you really want and help you figure out, hey, is my current business model still working for me? Okay, I want you to revisit these questions as many times as you need, but let's get started here. Question number 1. Is your current business model still meeting your goals? Evaluate whether your business model still aligns with your long-term vision of the future and if it's actually getting the results you want. When I hired a chief technology officer back in 2020 for Social Curator, I had no idea what I was doing. But I knew that the Social Curator membership wasn't serving the needs of the users the way we needed it to. We needed to integrate with every social platform so people could plan, create, and publish their marketing posts. I began formulating a pivot when I realized, hey, our current business model is not going to get us to where we want to go. Question number 2, are customer needs or market trends changing? Are there changes in customer demands or the market trends that you can say, hey, wait, maybe I could cater to that if I made a pivot? Question number 3, what is your intuition telling you? I know, we're going to get a little woo here. Consider your gut feeling and then try to understand or find the root of that emotion. If you're feeling an emotion like fear, it may be stemming from past failures that prevented you from taking lessons and then trying them again. If you tried a pivot in the past and it felt like a failure, number 1, welcome to the club. And number 2, it's time to reframe that experience. You learned what not to do again. So you're not starting from the same place. You're starting with more experience now than you had back then. Okay, what I'm gonna focus on is learning to trust your gut. And I know that it takes practice, but the more you do it, the faster you learn how to leverage your intuition. Now on to question 4. Do you have a clear vision for the pivot? Can you describe what you want to change in just one sentence? Define a clear objective and goals for that pivot, and then write down what you hope to achieve with the changes that you're going to make. Question number 5, how will the pivot impact your team and resources? Consider whether you have the capacity to move forward in the near future or if it has to wait. Remember, pivots will require you to operate your business differently. You must make changes to get change. Now, this might mean expanding your team to accommodate a higher demand or downsizing the team to manage your finances while you experiment with it. The key here is to focus on what the pivot means, not just the future vision of the business, but like what does it actually mean for current resources in order to make that pivot happen. Question number 6, what are the potential risks and rewards? I want you to evaluate the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And then I want you to weigh those benefits against the potential challenges. Literally write down the best and worst case scenarios. The best news is that it won't likely be the worst case scenario, nor will it likely be the best. Statistically, it will end up somewhere in the middle. But once you've prepared for both ends of the spectrum, you're going to be ready to make that pivot when you need. Question number 7. Have you gathered customer feedback and insights? I want you to get input from your customers, and you can do this like surveys, feedback forms, because you need to understand their needs and preferences better. When you understand this, it's going to help you prepare for your pivot, knowing that your customers are going to continue to pay and support that business. Okay, question number 8. We're almost there. 8 of 10. What are your competitors doing? Research your competitors to see how they're adapting to market changes and whether your pivot can accommodate, provide, create a better competitive advantage. Question number 9. Have you tested the pivot on a smaller scale? I want you to consider testing different pieces of the pivot to validate its effectiveness before implementing it fully. So when Social Curator launched its upgraded platform in May 2023, we launched it to just a few hundred users. We watched and analyzed their actions and their feedback. And then, based on what we heard and saw, we made changes to enhance the experience. And then we rolled out the entire upgraded platform to a few more hundred users. And then we watched them, how they used it, what they said, and then we repeated this process to get feedback and test with a small amount of people each time. Now, once we felt pretty confident with our changes, we unveiled it to thousands of users, but we didn't publicly announce the changes until we could test it even more. After 6 weeks of beta testing with users, we made the upgraded platform available to the public, and the feedback was amazing. Okay, great, but we'll pause. People think that a pivot looks easy, but what these 10 questions we're not even at question number 10, I'm warming you up there. These 9 questions are helping you prepare on how to best insulate your pivot. And now we've arrived to question number 10. How will the pivot affect your current customers or clients? I want you to put yourself in their shoes. How are they going to respond? What will they need to make sure that they're supported and seen? How can you create ways to bring them along the pivot with you? Think about your current customers and clients and how this could affect your relationship with them. When you think about these things, the answer to those questions, they're not going to tell you immediately if you're ready to make a pivot. But the point of this exercise is for you to move closer to making this decision for your business. Now, once you determine if it's time to pivot, here's a 5-step framework to guide you through the pivoting process. Step number 1, you're going to want to plan and strategize your next steps. Now, this will probably feel exciting, same feelings like when you first started your business. When you develop your plan, I want to make sure that you are specific with it. What are the specific actions required so that your pivot is successful? I want you to set clear objectives, a clear timeline, and clear KPIs, your key performance indicators. This way you're going to track your progress. I want to make sure that you're sharing this information with your team before the pivot. You need to communicate how the pivot will succeed. And you need to ensure that every team member is responsible for their role and they know what that is. Step number 2 is to gather the resources you'll need. Okay, so what do you need for your transition? I want you to think about more than just financial resources, because if you're anything like me, money, okay, no. This can include your team, contractors, technology, or even mentorship. I might need a mentor to support that pivot. Now, once you've outlined what you need, do not pass go. Okay, this is like Monopoly. Don't pass go until you've gotten that into place. You need a new level of support as you pivot. So you have to get that locked in first, and then you can get into step number 3. And that is to communicate the pivot internally. Now, I mentioned this as part of step 1, but I'm repeating it again because chances are your leadership team has been included in the decision-making process, but the rest of your team and contractors, these are people who work with you, we need to communicate the pivot to them in a really cool, exciting way. So structural change for a lot of teams can be scary. And, it's for good reason. People get scared when things change. Sometimes a pivot means that you're letting team members go. When you have to let team members go, I want you to treat this process with the most respect and dignity. So a while ago, I made a huge business pivot, and it required letting go of team members. For months, I tried to make things work, and I was trying desperately to find a way that we could make this pivot and bring the team with us. And I'm telling you, I'm without any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not exaggerating, I could not sleep for months. I made myself sick with this decision, and I cried when I realized this massive pivot would require us to restructure. The entire time, I simply focused on what I could do and treat this downsizing with as much respect and dignity. It was the hardest moment of my professional career, but it was important to me to speak to each team member personally and thank them for their work. I wrote letters of recommendation, and I opened my personal networks to help get replacement. My hope is that, even when this was a really difficult time for everybody, I want them to know, and I hope that they do, that I deeply respected them. If you don't have to let team members go, let them know how they are going to contribute and clearly update to their role description, right? So it's like, update the role description, tell them how they're going to be a part of this pivot, sell them on the vision, and then get them 100% on board. Step 4 is to test changes in small ways before fully rolling it out. Now, you could do this with your current customers, and then you get honest feedback, and then you make them feel like they were included and involved in that change. Step number 5 is to monitor and evaluate. I want you to continuously monitor the progress of the pivot using established KPIs that you set back on step number 1. And then I want to make sure that there's no gaps and everything is working perfectly and properly. You'll want to continue to evaluate the effectiveness of this pivot strategy and make decisions when things aren't working. What do we need to shift? All right, here's another moment of honesty. We're being very honest in this conversation. It won't always work the way you hoped. Pivots hardly work the way that you hope, and that's okay. In fact, it's totally normal. As you pivot, you must make small changes to adapt to your current situation. That's the process of the pivot. So resist the urge to freak out, okay? So let's review everything we just covered. We walked through 10 questions to ask yourself when you're considering if it's time to make a pivot. I want to encourage you to revisit these questions whenever you're feeling out of alignment or just unsure if you're ready to make a change in your business. We then talked a 5-step framework to guide you through the pivoting process. Step 1 is to plan and strategize your next step. Step 2 is to gather the resources you'll need. Step 3 is to communicate the pivot internally. Step 4 is to test changes in small ways before fully rolling it out. Step 5 is to monitor and evaluate. Okay, throughout the process, it is so important to be open to feedback and adapt your strategies. This makes sure that the pivot aligns with your goals and delivers the results you want. I want to make sure that you are staying agile, you have to take some calculated risks, but always remember to stay committed to the vision. You're pivoting to change, and change requires change. Remember, pivoting is an ongoing journey, and making mistakes and failures are simply part of the process, and that is totally okay. So what I want to know is, I'm sitting here talking about my business pivots, and I want to know, have you made a pivot in business? Do you feel like a pivot is on the horizon? I want to know in the comments so I can connect and root you along on your journey.